Hey guys, tonight we begin with the soft glow of wax and the faint scratch of wool slippers across cool stone. You're stepping into a place. Few modern feet have wandered a medieval convent tucked just beyond the outer walls of a sleepy town, somewhere between a mossy forest and a winding stream. The year doesn't matter. It smells like thyme and beeswax and the faint trace of damp stone. That's timeless enough. You push open a creaking wooden door, its iron hinges sighing with effort, and are met with the scent of old parchment, lavender-stuffed pillows and bread that's been baked too long but still tastes like home. The light is dim not because it's evening, though it is, but because that's just how things are here. No glass bulbs humming above, no microwave clock blinking 12 Hojran, just flame. Tiny flickering flames that lick the wicks of thick beeswax candles lined along every alcove like obedient golden soldiers. And just so you know, you probably wouldn't survive this routine. Not unless you really like waking up 4 times a night and praying until your knees go numb. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the please subscribe to my channel and share your location and local time, only if you genuinely enjoy my content. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You've arrived just after Vespers. The air is heavy with frankincense and evening breath. A bell somewhere above you tolls gently, not to summon but to release. The sisters scatter to their quarters in pairs or quiet solitude, each one wrapped in layers of wool and devotion. You follow Sister Claire, who is, for lack of a better word, the convent's night owl. She moves quickly, but not hurriedly. Her candle doesn't flicker. That's how steady her hands are. You're not here to convert or confess. You're here to observe. Maybe you lost your way on the pilgrim road. Maybe you wandered in from a dream. Doesn't matter. You're part of this now. She leads you to a small stone room, sparsely furnished but not austere. A cot, a shelf, a table, and oddly enough, 5 candles of varying height, all half burned and marked with pins. One even has a nail through it. You think of birthday cakes and blackout dinners, but this is different. Outside, the sky has gone indigo. You hear owls. You hear nothing. The world is preparing to sleep, but not here. This place runs on a different clock, one without gears or dials, just wax and willpower. You settle onto the cot. The straw mattress sighs under your weight. The blanket smells like thyme. And you watch as Sister Claire moves to the shelf, carefully adjusting a candle so the pin inside it rests exactly above a tiny pewter bowl. You raise an eyebrow. She doesn't explain, just smiles like someone who knows a good secret. That candle, it's your wake-up call. You learn later that this system came out of desperation, not design. The sisters need to pray at precise times, matins, Lord's prime. All the holy checkpoints that dot the night like stars on a monk's chart. But without clocks, they had only the stars, and clouds don't care about devotion, so they turn to something more predictable: wax. Mainstream historical fact. Medieval monastic communities, especially among Benedictines, maintained strict schedules for prayer, known as the divine office. Yet mechanical clocks didn't become common until the 14th century. So many relied on natural cues or rudimentary inventions like marked candles to keep time during the night. You breathe in and the wax gives off a scent, honey mostly, but something smokier beneath. The candle nearest you burns low and the pin inside it gleams red for a moment. Then it falls. Ping! You startle slightly, but Sister Claire only nods. "Time for vigils," she whispers. And just like that, you're rising in the dark, joining a slow stream of shadows, cloaked in habits, all headed toward the chapel. The air is cooler here, damper. Your feet echo on the stones. A sister ahead of you coughs once and it feels like thunder. But then the chanting begins low syllabic ancient, and the walls seem to inhale. Fringe tidbit. Some surviving convent records include drawings of these early alarm candles, often using pins' weights or even tiny rocks balanced inside wax. One French abbess even embedded a string that tightened a tambourine when the wax melted through, though scholars still argue whether that was intentional or the result of one very musical nun. Historians still argue whether these inventions were widespread or the eccentricities of a few inventive women in isolated convents. But you can't help feeling like you're watching a genius at work, one who doesn't care whether anyone ever remembers her name. The candles guide the night. They don't shout. They whisper. They don't demand your attention. They earn it gently, patiently, inch by inch. You return to your cot before dawn. The room feels warmer now, though the fire's out. You lie back and watch the last candle shrink. You feel the rhythm, the slow tempo of a world not run by buzzing, but by burning. You don't dream that night. Or if you do, it's of wax rivers and tiny chimes echoing across time like footsteps in snow. You're still rubbing sleep from your eyes, though, let's be honest. It wasn't exactly a REM cycle kind of night. A few hours here, a few there, broken by bells and waxy pings. You shift slightly in your straw-stuffed cot, and it whispers beneath you, as if sharing in your fatigue. But the moment you hear the soft rustle of wool and the thump of sandaled feet beyond the wall, you know no sleeping in today. The convent is already awake, not buzzing, more like gently humming, like bees too polite to sting. You follow the sound of movement to the kitchen. It's barely lit, save for a few candles stuttering above the hearth. A cauldron is bubbling quietly, probably porridge. Definitely porridge. Always porridge. Sister Agnes is there, the unofficial breakfast coordinator and full-time spoon clanker. She doesn't speak much, but she does nod when she sees you and offers a hunk of yesterday's bread. Still warm near the middle, you take it. One of the other sisters slips a bowl under your nose. The porridge is thick beige and vaguely smells of cloves. You take a bite. Yep, it's nutritionally adequate. While you eat, your eyes drift again to the candles, one on a ledge, with a thread dangling out the top, another with markings in red ink every inch or so. These aren't decorations. They're timekeepers, like tiny waxy sandglasses that melt away the day. Mainstream historical fact. Before mechanical clocks were common, candle clocks were widely used across Europe, particularly in monastic settings. Candles were marked at regular intervals, each marking representing a specific unit of time. As the candle burned down to a mark, it could trigger a bell or simply serve as a visual cue. But here's where things get weird in a delightfully nerdy monastic inventor kind of way. One sister had rigged a small stone tied to a string embedded in the wax. When the candle melted just enough, the stone dropped into a bowl with a satisfying clink. A medieval alarm clock. Elegant, quiet, slightly dangerous if you're not careful with placement. You make your way to the scriptorium. A cool, dry room, thick with parchment and ink. The sisters are already busy copying texts, psalms, herbal remedies, the occasional letter from a bishop who writes like he just discovered adjectives. You lean over Sister Magdalene's shoulder and spot a curious sketch in the margins of her manuscript. It looks like a candle, except it's sitting inside a cage made of sticks. She notices your curiosity and whispers to keep the mice out. Apparently, local rodents had taken a liking to beeswax, which presented a very unholy fire hazard. So yes, the alarm candles were efficient until they attracted flame-happy vermin. Fringe tidbit. In at least one 12th century convent, in what is now southern Germany, there are records of rat-guarding lantern boxes crafted from woven twigs, soaked in brine to deter chewing. They didn't always work, but the concept of candle defense mechanisms was definitely a thing. Sister Magdalene giggles at her own drawing. Maybe the rats were just trying to wake us up, she says, half joking. Historians still argue whether these modifications, pins, strings, counterweights, constitute true timekeeping inventions or simply improvisational survival tactics. Either way, the nuns weren't sitting around waiting for clocks to tick, they made their own rhythm. By midday, you're invited to help with candle making. It's held in a sun-warmed courtyard that smells strongly of wax ash and herbal infusions, mostly rosemary and crushed rose hips. Sister Judith explains each step with a kind of reverent precision. Dip, cool, dip again, snip the wick, repeat. Each candle you help make is subtly different. One is short and squat, another tall and elegant like it went to finishing school. All of them will end up in the chapel, the kitchen, or someone's tiny sleeping cell marking time in silent devotion. But one candle gets special treatment. It's wrapped in tiny strips of vellum, each inscribed with a saint's name. This one is used when someone is sick or dying, Judith says. It's meant to burn slow, steady, and carry prayers upwards with the scent of frankincense and tallow. You try not to breathe too deeply. The candlework is messy. Your hands are sticky. There's wax in your sleeve. You step back and admire your handiwork, a row of golden, slightly crooked soldiers ready to march toward midnight. Later, during the quiet hours before dusk, you wander into the garden. There's a sundial half-shaded and mostly ignored. It looks like someone carved a snail on it in chalk. Probably Sister Beatrix. She's got a sense of humour. You lie in the grass for a moment. The sky is turning the colour of boiled plums, and the first star peeks out. You wonder how many prayers it has overheard. Probably thousands, maybe more. The bell rings again, but softer this time. Compline. You return inside where the final prayers of the day echo through the chapel like a lullaby. You see the candles glowing in clusters, each one marking a vow, a moment, a memory. None of them tick. None of them buzz. They simply glow and melt and whisper the time. You settle into your cot again, one candle near your head, another near your feet. You feel like a time sandwich, a sleepy one. And just as your eyes begin to close, the tiniest ping echoes across the room. Ping! You smile. It's working. You rise before the candle pings this time. Not out of saintly zeal, let's be honest, but because the scent of damp soil and rosemary is already creeping through the shutters. Someone's been up for hours. Probably Sister Clare. That woman works like she's being chased by divine purpose, or possibly a very small angry goat. You shuffle out into the morning haze and blink against the soft grey light. The convent garden is already breathing alive with the rustle of herbs and the hum of sleepy bees. Dew sparkles on the leaves like the world's most understated jewellery. Everything smells green, like basil mint, and that strange earthy sweetness that only wet lavender can pull off. You grab a wicker basket and join Sister Clare, who's already elbow deep in marjoram like it's a Monday tradition. She doesn't look up, just says, "Watch for slugs. They're back." Of course they are. Your job this morning is simple snip, sort, bundle, repeat. You pinch sprigs of thyme with a rhythm that oddly matches your heartbeat. It's soothing, almost like the plants are guiding your hands. Maybe they are. You wouldn't put it past a medieval herb to have opinions. Mainstream historical fact. Medieval convents didn't just grow herbs for cooking. They cultivated expansive medicinal gardens that rivaled early pharmacies. Nuns trained in herbology were often the primary caregivers for local communities, preparing tinctures, balms and potions based on ancient and often sacred texts. And your stand is in the middle of one. The infirmary row, as Sister Clare calls it, is loaded with comfrey yarrow and feverfew. You swear the lemon balm is glaring at you, probably because you picked it crooked yesterday. You carry your bundle to the cloister bench, where Sister Elfrida is already laying herbs out to dry on linen sheets. She's muttering under her breath something about last year's mint drying too slow. You nod solemnly, as though you too have been betrayed by mint. She gestures to a strange little contraption beside her, a shallow clay dish filled with beeswax with a small twisted wick at its centre. "Heat marker," she says, tapping the edge. When it pulls, time's up. Apparently, this was today's innovation in passive herbal timing, an herbalist's companion, wax-powered and snail paste. Fringe. Tidbit, in some nunneries, beeswax wasn't just burned, it was infused with herbs before casting. Lavender wax mixtures supposedly calmed nerves and repelled flies. Some even burned myrtle or rue candles while brewing sleep tonics to keep the air spiritually clean. As you spread lavender blossoms into a loose pile, you ask Sister Elfrida how they keep track of everything. Which herbs dry faster, which need more turning. Her answer, feel. And a little wax. You try to remember if there's any modern app with that kind of poetic logic. Probably not. You glance around the garden. There's a rhythm here, quiet, slow, deliberate, like everything has its own heartbeat, and none of it hurries unless it must. The bees hum, the wind stirs the mint, and the candle with the twisted wick flickers once, then goes out. Time's up. Back inside the cloister, you're handed a pot of crushed valerian root to deliver to Sister Joan in the infirmary. You try not to spill it as you walk, smells like bitter earth and maybe old shoes. Sister Joan accepts it with a smile and adds it to a boiling cauldron of something thick and green. Sleep brew, she explains, for Sister Hilda's nerves. She points at another's candle burning beside the pot. This one even stranger. It's two-tiered with a single pin embedded at the halfway point. Tells me when it's time to stir, she says, just as the pin melts free and drops into a little brass bowl with a ping, like a frog hiccuping. You jump, she laughs. First time always gets you. Historians still argue whether these timed herbal preparations were purely ritualistic or rooted in trial and error science. But when you smell the final brew, earthy, floral, slightly peppery, you suspect the answer might be both. Faith and fungus working together. You spend the afternoon pressing calendula into wax discs for future healing salves. Your fingers smell like sunshine, and your sleeves are stained yellow. The sisters joke about candle hands a mark of true herb work. You flex proudly. Later, you return to your sleeping cell, fingers, tired arms sore, in a strangely satisfying way. There's a single candle waiting. You light it, watching the wax melt into a tiny golden lake. The light flickers not urgently, but rhythmically like a breath. You lie down smelling of herbs and beeswax, and just a little like a cupboard. The air is cool. Your hands twitch slightly, echoing the day's work. And before sleep takes you, you murmur a quiet thank you to time, to Sister Claire. And maybe to the slug you never saw, but suspect was watching the whole time. You blink awake to the soft scrape of reed pens. It's barely dawn, but the scriptorium is already humming in its quiet bookish way. The candles along the wall are tall and elegant, each one marked with pins at precise intervals. You can hear the faint plink of a brass bowl as one falls, triggering a subtle reshuffle in the room. Without speaking, one nun stands and gently swaps places with another, their work woven into a timekeeper's rhythm. It's choreography by wax and wick. Your slippers scuff lightly on the stone floor as you step inside. The air smells of old parchment iron gall ink and a whisper of beeswax. It's oddly calming, like the memory of a rainy library. You settle onto a wooden bench where Sister Beatrice nods at you over her spectacles. She gestures at a blank sheet of parchment ink pot and a pen with a nib so thin it might double as a medieval eyebrow brush. Copy that, she says softly, pointing to a Latin passage on a tattered vellum scroll. You nod, then realize you don't speak Latin. She just raises an eyebrow. Copy, she says again, this time with a faint smirk. You get to work. Mainstream historical fact: medieval scriptoria were often staffed by women in convents, especially for devotional texts and local record-keeping. They were some of the only literate women of their time, and often more meticulous than their male counterparts. Your hand trembles slightly as you trace each letter. They're not just letters, they're spells, spirals and curls that look like they could animate a basilisk or at least send a strongly worded prayer to St. Agnes. Beside you, Sister Beatrice hums tunelessly and dips her pen with such precision it feels like a performance. Fringe tidbit: some scriptoria used colour-coded candle clocks to pace their copying sessions. Red wax for scripture, green for garden logs, blue for hymnals. Allegedly, if a nun fell behind and her assigned candle burnt out before her page was done, she owed the entire room fresh-baked rye rolls. Time passes slowly, gently. You're only a few lines in, but you've developed a growing respect for the fine art of writing without sneezing. One stray drop of ink, and it's back to scraping the parchment with a penknife. The candles around you burn with quiet purpose. One reaches a pin, clink. Another nun rotates in. Her hands are ink-stained, and her expression is pure satisfaction. She slides into place and begins a new page. No rush, no fuss, just wax words and women who've mastered both. Historians still argue whether candle clocks in scriptoria were true timekeepers or simply motivational tools. But here, they feel like tiny, flickering lords of discipline, fair but firm. Halfway through your copywork, a puff of wind sneaks through the high window and dances across the parchment. You pin the corner down with your elbow, catching a whiff of rain and distant sheep. Somewhere, a bell rings. Not a call to prayer, just Sister Agnes dropping something again. Beatrice chuckles. "Third time this week," she mutters. "We're betting she knocks over the ink next." You stifle a giggle and dip your pen. As the hours pass, your wrist learns the rhythm. Your back complains. Your stomach grumbles like a minor earthquake. A nun hands you a biscuit without looking up. It's dry, crumbly, and tastes like time and regret, but you eat it anyway. You finish your page, just as your candle's pin drops with a cheerful tink. Sister Beatrice peers at your work nods once and whispers, "Acceptable." You beam. In this world, that's practically a standing ovation. Later in the refectory, the sisters share bread and soft cheese, and the candle clocks tick down behind them. One nun jokes that the cheese smells like the bishop's sandals. No one disagrees. The room fills with quiet laughter. You spend the afternoon watching the younger novices practice penmanship. Their letters wobble like baby goats. One ink blot explodes across the page like a medieval Rorschach test. You tell her it looks like Saint Jerome after a bad haircut. She laughs so hard she ruins the next line too. You head back to your cell that evening, arms aching, eyes blurry, but mind buzzing with the soft power of words. Your candle is half burnt, the pin still holding steady. You lie down beside it, imagining all the letters drifting up into the air, curling into dreams. You think about the timekeeper candles, about the quiet way they hold the day together. Wax and wick as clock and bell. A world measured not in hours but in meltings. The pin drops. You wander toward the kitchen by instinct, or maybe it's the scent of roasted turnips and barley bread tugging you along like a rope. It's late in the day, and your feet drag slightly across the worn flagstones, but your stomach's wide awake already, composing sonnets to soup. Inside, the heat hits you first, thick and comforting, like the kitchen's been stewing for centuries. A dozen women move around in quiet synchronicity. Wooden spoons clatter, dough rises in nestled bowls, and candle clocks flicker from hooks above the prep tables. Each candle, just like in the scriptorium, is marked with iron pins that signal shifts in the routine. When the wax melts down and a pin clinks into its dish, it's time to stir taste or check the oven stones. No sand, no bells, just fire and melt. You duck beneath a rafter strung with drying herbs, rosemary, marjoram, and something that might be stinging nettle, or based on the smell a cousin to sweaty socks. You're handed a task, slicing carrots. The knife is heavy, the board is scarred, and the carrots seem suspiciously judgmental. You slice anyway. Mainstream historical fact. Many medieval convents were largely self-sustaining, growing their own food, managing herds, and baking daily. Kitchens were the literal and spiritual hearths of these institutions where work was prayer and recipes were more sacred than sermons. Sister Marjorie, wearing a flour-smeared russet apron, slides a candle clock across the table to you. It's stubby, half-burned, and smells faintly of beeswax and old soup. "This one's for the oatcakes," she says. "When the pin drops, flip them. If you burn them, we blame Saint Zita." "Who's Saint Zita, you ask?" She grins. "Patron saint of housemaids and impatient stomachs." You smile and lean in to watch the flame. It dances gently, curling the edges of the pin shadow as if sketching time. You wonder how many meals have been measured this way, how many prayers rose with the steam from a pot. Fringe, tidbit. Some candle clocks in kitchens were flavoured or perfumed with cooking herbs, lavender thyme, even powdered ginger, so the timekeeper also scented the space. It's debated whether this was practical devotional or just a very clever way to make turnips seem less sad. A novice fumbles a jug and spills milk across the table. Marjorie sighs, grabs a cloth and mutters, she's still convinced boiling means angry water. You offer to help and she waves you toward the fireplace. "Stoke the fire. We need another quarter hour's heat before the pin gives way." You grab the iron poker and prod the coals, sending sparks up the chimney like tiny saints in training. The warmth coats your skin, chases away the last bit of winter from your knuckles. Behind you, loaves are being turned. A pot bubbles. A pin clinks. Flip, Marjorie says without looking up. You obey. The oatcakes hiss against the griddle, their bottoms golden and crisp. You resist the urge to sneak a bite barely. Historians still argue whether these candle clocks were common across all orders or peculiar to certain convents in France and the Low Countries. But one thing is clear, their use wasn't just practical, it was a kind of sacred rhythm, a way to sanctify routine. The melt of wax was in a sense a liturgy all its own. A bell somewhere signals the evening psalms, but here in the kitchen, the real call to worship is the smell of stew. Sister Marjorie ladles thick brown broth into wooden bowls and hands you one with a wink. Don't spill it. We're out of miracles this week. You carry your bowl to the window and sit beside a basket of onions like a very polite goblin. Outside, the sky fades to plum and charcoal. The last glow of the sun brushes the tops of the cloister walls. Your spoon scrapes gently. The broth is perfect, savoury, slow and rich with rosemary. You sigh, and the onions seem to sigh with you. One candle clock remains lit, burning down, beside a pie that hums of apples and cloves. When the pin drops, dessert is served. Until then, everyone moves slowly, reverently, like the very air is kneaded into devotion. A cat slinks across the floor, flicks its tail at your boot, and steals a sliver of fish from the prep bench. No one stops it. It's clearly a senior nun in disguise. You linger longer than necessary. The candle flickers. The pin drops. A slice of pie is placed before you. It is warm and fragrant, and somehow tastes like the colour amber. Later, as you head back through the cloister, in the deepening dusk, you can still smell the hearth smoke clinging to your sleeves. You pass a line of candles lighting the hallway, some tall, some short, each a whisper of passing time. None of them ring, none of them tick, but every one of them tells the hour, and maybe even the mood. You reach your cell. There's a fresh candle there, unlit, with a tiny pin balanced halfway down its side. You light it, lie back, let your limbs go heavy, and wait for the soft sound of time, letting go. You wake to silence, not the kind that settles gently over a sleepy town, but the kind that presses against your skin, dense velvet-like, with the faintest pulse of breath just behind it. Midnight silence, monastic silence. Somewhere beyond the wall, a candlepin has dropped. You rise slowly, moving without thought. Your feet slip into slippers, your hands find the thick woolen shawl draped over the bed rail. The stone beneath your soles is cold, but not unfriendly. It feels like a truth older than the convent itself, wakefulness born not of clocks, but of flame and instinct. Down the hall, dim glows mark the way. Each alcove holds a single candle clock, its flame steady, its purpose precise. You wonder how many sisters woke like this before you, centuries worth of whispered footsteps and sleepy psalms, each summoned by melting wax. Mainstream, historical fact, many medieval monasteries and convents observed the liturgy of the hours, which required waking during the night, often around midnight for a vigil or matin service. Before mechanical clocks, candles mark these hours with silent precision. You enter the chapel and your breath catches. Dozens of nuns kneel on the stone floor, their robes a soft chorus of indigo, saffron and teal. Candle clocks burn low beside each pew, the flames flickering against the polished brass of altar icons. The air is fragrant with beeswax and something sweeter, maybe dried myrtle or crushed lavender smuggled in from the garden for precisely this moment. A psalm begins so quiet it barely stirs the silence. You don't know the words, but you feel their shape, round ancient comforting. You kneel with the others. The stone beneath you is cool, the shawl is warm. Time, you realise, is irrelevant here. The candle does the counting. Fringe tidbit in some monastic records. Certain candles were infused with specific scents believed to influence mood or clarity of prayer. One curious note from a 14th century Flemish abbey describes rose candles for nights of sorrow. A novice beside you shifts in her robe and stifles a sneeze. A small thing, but the entire chapel seems to breathe with it. This is not a place for performance. It's a place for simply being a kind of divine drowsiness wrapped in candlelight. You watch a pin wobble on a candle across the nave. It trembles, holds, then drops with a soft chime. A nun near the front opens a worn book, and the psalm changes key, rising barely, then softening again. Historians still argue whether the candle clock's role in vigils was primarily practical or spiritual. Was it merely a way to time the readings? Or was it something deeper, a recognition that divine presence is felt in things that melt, that change, that disappear slowly into glow? You don't know. But you do know this: you've never felt time move like this before. Not forward, not backward, just gently. One of the elder sisters lights a fresh candle and places a pin at its midpoint. The flame catches, flickers, steadies. A new hour begins, but no one moves. There's no urgency here, no bells, just the slow language of light. You close your eyes, and in that moment, you're not in a medieval convent. You're not even entirely awake. You're somewhere between then and now, breath and prayer, wax and ash. The flame hums. The floor supports you. A chant lingers at the edge of your hearing. You dream with your eyes open. The vigil ends not with a declaration, but with a breath, one final chord, sung so softly it could be mistaken for silence. Nuns rise slowly. Some stretch like cats. Some clasp hands in gratitude. Others, like you, sit stunned for a moment, wondering what just passed through. You exit the chapel into a corridor still scented by candles. Your steps are softer now. You don't rush. There's nothing to beat, nothing to win. The candle will drop when it's ready. And until then, you exist in a kind of suspended glow. Back in your room, the wind scratches lightly against the wooden shutter. You pull the blanket up and lie down, still fully dressed. Just for a moment, you think, but sleep drapes itself across your thoughts like a fresh linen cloth. And somewhere across the chapel, another pin lets go. You hear it. You smile. The night continues. By the time the sun begins to tease the frost from the leaded glass windows, you're already halfway down the cloister path. The morning bells haven't rung yet, probably still waiting on the second pin to drop. But you're not headed toward the chapel today. You're going to the wax room. It's not marked. Nothing is. You've learned the monastic way doesn't include labels, just knowing. And so you find it by memory. The third arch past the herb cellar beneath the tapestry of St. Clair, threading stars through darkness. You push the wooden door gently. It creaks like it's stretching after sleep. Inside, the scent hits first rich beeswax, sun-warmed and honey-thick, edged with a hint of charred wick. Long wooden tables stretch wall to wall, and nuns in teal and russet robes are already at work, their sleeves rolled, fingers stained with soot and sap. Mainstream historical fact. Many medieval convents produced their own candles, often mixing beeswax with tallow or natural resins. This labour wasn't just spiritual, it was essential for self-sufficiency and devotion alike. You're handed an apron. A kind-eyed nun gestures to a spot beside her. Her hands move expertly, dipping reeds into a vat of golden wax, letting the layer cool before dipping again. It takes time, she whispers, but so do prayers. You smile, unsure if that was meant as comfort or correction. Across the table, younger novices prep wicks, twisting fibres, anchoring them to tiny clay moulds, placing brass pins with the precision of cathedral architects. Each pin marks a future moment, a future sound, a drop, a prayer, a call to wake or to stillness. Fringe, tidbit in at least one 15th century French abbey. Certain candles were embedded with dried rosemary or sage, believed to keep monks alert during long winter vigils. Some even called them wake roots. You're shown how to carve lines in the taper shallow grooves to measure burn rate. It's not exact science, but it's exact enough for the rhythm of psalms. Each line is a potential hour, each hour a breath in the long lung of monastic time. As you dip and roll, the candle grows. Not taller, fatter, rounder, a quiet belly of wax waiting to become light. The nun beside you hums an old melody, one you think you heard last night during the vigil. It carries like a lullaby, but lands like a spell. You glance at the wax shelf. Rows upon rows of finished clocks line the wall. Some are tapered, some squat and humble. Some bear tiny carvings, crosses, lilies, stars. Each one is a ticking soul. Each one knows when it will speak. Historians still argue whether nuns developed candle clocks independently or adapted earlier monastic methods. Some point to Arabic wax measurement texts. Others insist on pure divine inspiration. God lit their way, one overzealous 19th century scholar wrote with dripping honey fire. You press a fresh pin into the cooling wax. It sticks just slightly, then holds. You realize the satisfaction is addictive. A candle made by hand is unlike any timepiece you've seen, fragile, fragrant, warm. You can't cradle a sundial. Another nun, much older, shuffles in and places a wrapped bundle on the table. When she opens it, you blink. It's a stack of broken pins, bent, warped, some scorched black. Spent time, she jokes softly, and everyone chuckles like it's the convent's favourite punchline. You're asked to carry 2 finished candles to the infirmary. Sister Marta is unwell again. As you walk the candlelit hallway, the warmth of the wax radiates through the cloth bundle. It feels alive, like you're not just carrying a light, but the promise of morning. In the infirmary, a nun dozes beside a window. Her breathing is slow, steady. You place the candles on the ledge. When she wakes, they'll be there. When the pin drops, someone will come. That's the rhythm of this place. No alarms, no urgent knocks. Just wax flame and faith that light will fall exactly when it should. As you return to the wax room, you pass the herb garden. Lavender and thyme hang drying on racks. You recognize the scent from last night's vigil. Someone somewhere is always blending thyme with tenderness. You rejoin the table. Your candle has cooled. It's not perfect, slightly crooked maybe, but it holds a pin. It will burn, and that here is more than enough. By nightfall, the snow begins again. Just a hush at first, flakes like whispers against the arched windows, collecting in the corners like forgotten psalms. You make your way back to the chapel, bundled in your borrowed cloak. The fabric smells faintly of thyme and smoke. Around you, the air is colder, sharper, and the stones beneath your feet echo just a little more than usual. The candle clocks are already lit. They stand like golden spires along the transept walls, each one tall, tapered, marked with tiny pins that wink in the glow. Wax has begun to pool in shallow saucers beneath their feet. A few nuns are already kneeling, heads bowed, hands still. One of them hums not a hymn you know, but something simpler, older. Perhaps it predates the chapel itself. Mainstream historical fact: in many medieval convents, night vigils were segmented by timekeeping methods, such as hour candles or water clocks. These methods guided structured prayers called matins, often beginning as early as 2 a.m. You settle onto a cushion, thin, worn but warm from use. Your candle is near the pulpit. Its flame wobbles once, then steadies as if sensing your presence. For a moment, everything feels suspended. The snow, the breath, the entire century. Then plink, a pin drops. It's not loud, not jarring, just a faint metallic note against the base of a brass tray. A nun to your left rises smoothly, steps forward and begins to chant. Her voice is low, even lilting. You don't understand the Latin, but you feel the shape of it, the rising arcs, the round syllables, the way the sound settles into the ribs of the building like snow into eaves. Another candle, another pin, another voice joins. Soon the chapel fills with soft murmurs, overlapping but never colliding. It feels less like a choir and more like a tide, gentle, ancient, inevitable. Fringe. Tidbit: some sources suggest that a few candles in larger abbeys were designed with tiny bells instead of pins, so when the wax melted to a certain level, the bell dropped and rang gently on a brass plate. Scholars argue whether this practice was common or isolated to particularly wealthy convents. You watch the pins. They glitter slightly in the light, like constellations plotted in beeswax, each one ticking toward its fall, its chime, its hour. The nuns never glance at the clocks. They simply know. You begin to wonder whether they're actually waiting for time, or if time has just learned to follow them. The snow outside thickens. One of the candles sputters briefly, its flame drawn toward a draught. A novice quietly shields it with her hand, muttering a prayer you don't catch. The flame obeys. Historians still argue Whether these candle rituals were practical solutions or spiritual metaphors, did they light the way, or were they the way? Some say the timekeeping was incidental, and that the real value was the rhythm it gave to communal devotion. You close your eyes, the wax continues to drip, the pins continue to fall. You hear another voice begin, a young one, trembling slightly but sure in its cadence. A harmony joins it, richer, older than another. No conductor, no signal, just time unfolding, wax melting breath rising into sound. Somewhere near the altar, a sister gently snoozes. No one nudges her. Sleep here is no sin. It is just another kind of prayer. Another plink. This one comes from your candle. You startle slightly, not because it's loud, but because it's yours. A sister smiles at you from across the aisle, then returns to her page. You don't move. You don't speak. You just let the sound hang there for a moment, like incense. You think about the first nun who thought to stick a pin in wax. Was it desperation, boredom, divine whisper? Did she fumble the first one? Did it drop too soon or too late? Or maybe it landed exactly when it was needed, and she looked up, smiled and thought, yes, that'll do. You lie back slightly, resting against the stone wall. The cold seeps in, but the light holds steady. Another pin falls. The vigil continues. It's not dramatic. There's no trumpet of dawn or sudden blaze of sun, but rather a gradual shift. A change in tone. The wax pools now look like amber glass. The breath that curled from your lips earlier hangs back, now less visible, less urgent. In the convent kitchen, you're handed a loaf still steaming from the oven, its crust dusted with coarse salt and flour. Your fingers sink in as you tear a piece. It's simple, hearty, and just the right amount of burnt on one edge. A nun to your right pours water into a basin, her sleeves rolled and her hair loose. She hums a different tune now. This one has rhythm, maybe even a sway if you're brave enough to hear it. Mainstream, historical fact. Monastic schedules in medieval Europe were built around the canonical hours, matins, lauds, prime, and so on. These prayers divided the day and night, and much of monastic life, including meals and labor, was carefully timed to match them. You chew slowly. The bread is good. Surprisingly good. Someone has added thyme or sage. You glance toward the hearth where a small clay pot still simmers. The morning meal, plain as it is, feels like celebration. The gutted candles from the night before now rest in the kitchen as well. Several of them are tilted, half-burned, their pins resting in shallow wooden trays like offerings. One still clings to a stubborn inch of wax, unwilling to let go. You help scrape cooled wax into a clay bowl. It will be melted down, reused, reshaped. Time itself apparently is recyclable. Fringe tidbit. Some monasteries reportedly collected candle stubs and wax scrapings with near-religious reverence. These remnants were thought to contain a trace of the prayers spoken while they burned, a kind of sacred residue. You think of that as you pluck a pin from one. It's still warm. A sister folds the edge of your sleeve before you drag it through a honey smear on the table. She doesn't scold, just nods toward the basin. Another task, another rhythm. Through the kitchen window you can see the garden beginning to brighten. Frost clings to the rosemary. A single blackbird hops across the edge of a barrel, pecking at last night's crumbs. Historians still argue whether convent kitchens were centers of innovation or just happy accidents. The recipes, the reuse of wax, the timing of meals via melted pins, all practical, all spiritual, all deeply human. You watch as the youngest sister balances on tiptoe to hang garlic braids from the ceiling beams. They sway slightly with the heat. Somewhere behind you, a spoon clinks into a clay cup. The ordinary symphony of waking. The conversation turns soft. Not whispers now, but soft talk. About weather, about laundry, about a goose who bit someone last week and still isn't sorry. No one mentions the candles, or the prayers, or the midnight wakefulness. It's all understood. All woven into the bread, the braid, the breath between words. You carry a basket of peelings to the compost pit beyond the cloister. A crow eyes you as you approach, then flaps off, startled by nothing or everything. The wind is crisp, but kinder now. You kneel by the heap and stir in the new scraps. The steam rises, earthy and sweet. It smells like breakfast and sleep and something older, maybe wax. When you return to the cloister, the chapel bell rings, not harsh, not commanding, just one soft note followed by two more. It sounds like someone tapping a glass to call for a toast. Another day has begun, and yet you feel like it's been going on for years. Maybe that's the secret of candle clocks. Not that they marked time, but that they melted it, softened it, slowed it down enough to notice. You pass by the row of burnt candles once more. The trays glint slightly with leftover pins. One of the nuns scoops them up, slides them into a small leather pouch, and tucks it away near her heart. She catches you watching, smiles, winks, then she's gone. You laugh a little quietly to yourself. No one said nuns didn't have style. The last of the snow is fading now. A rivulet runs from the eaves down the cobbled path, and you step over it carefully, like you've been here a lifetime. Maybe you have, or maybe it's just the rhythm, the wax, the warmth, the pinpricks of time that makes it feel so familiar. You glance once more at the sun climbing through the mist, and just like that you know, you'll never hear a modern alarm clock quite the same way again. It's not dramatic. There's no trumpet of dawn or sudden blaze of sun, but rather a gradual shift, a change in tone. The wax pools now look like amber glass. The breath that curled from your lips earlier hangs back now, less visible, less urgent. In the convent kitchen, you're handed a loaf, still steaming from the oven, its crust dusted with coarse salt and flour. Your fingers sink in as you tear a piece. It's simple, hearty, and just the right amount of burnt on one edge. A nun to your right pours water into a basin, her sleeves rolled and her hair loose. She hums a different tune now. This one has rhythm, maybe even a sway if you're brave enough to hear it. Mainstream historical fact. Monastic schedules in medieval Europe were built around the canonical hours, matins, lauds, prime, and so on. These prayers divided the day and night, and much of monastic life, including meals and labour, was carefully timed to match them. You chew slowly. The bread is good, surprisingly good. Someone has added thyme or sage. You glance toward the hearth, where a small clay pot still simmers. The morning meal, plain as it is, feels like celebration. The guttered candles from the night before now rest in the kitchen as well. Several of them are tilted, half-burned, their pins resting in shallow wooden trays like offerings. One still clings to a stubborn inch of wax, unwilling to let go. You help scrape cooled wax into a clay bowl. It will be melted down, reused, reshaped. Time itself apparently is recyclable. Fringe. Tidbit: some monasteries reportedly collected candle stubs and wax scrapings with near religious reverence. These remnants were thought to contain a trace of the prayers spoken, while they burned a kind of sacred residue. You think of that as you pluck a pin from one. It's still warm. A sister folds the edge of your sleeve before you drag it through a honey smear on the table. She doesn't scold, just nods toward the basin. Another task, another rhythm. Through the kitchen window, you can see the garden beginning to brighten. Frost clings to the rosemary. A single blackbird hops across the edge of a barrel, pecking at last night's crumbs. Historians still argue whether convent kitchens were centres of innovation or just happy accidents. The recipes, the reuse of wax, the timing of meals via melted pins, all practical, all spiritual, all deeply human. You watch as the youngest sister balances on tiptoe to hang garlic braids from the ceiling beams. They sway slightly with the heat. Somewhere behind you a spoon clinks into a clay cup, the ordinary symphony of waking. The conversation turns soft. Not whispers now, but soft talk. About weather, about laundry, about a goose who bit someone last week and still isn't sorry. No one mentions the candles, or the prayers, or the midnight wakefulness. It's all understood, all woven into the bread, the braid, the breath between words. You carry a basket of peelings to the compost pit beyond the cloister. A crow eyes you as you approach, then flaps off startled by nothing or everything. The wind is crisp, but kinder now. You kneel by the heap and stir in the new scraps. The steam rises earthy and sweet. It smells like breakfast and sleep, and something older, maybe wax. When you return to the cloister, the chapel bell rings, not harsh, not commanding, Just one soft note followed by two more. It sounds like someone tapping a glass to call for a toast. Another day has begun, and yet you feel like it's been going on for years. Maybe that's the secret of candle clocks. Not that they mark time, but that they melted it, softened it, slowed it down enough to notice. You pass by the row of burnt candles once more. The trays glint slightly with leftover pins. One of the nuns scoops them up, slides them into a small leather pouch, and tucks it away near her heart. She catches you watching, smiles, winks, then she's gone. You laugh a little quietly to yourself. No one said nuns didn't have style. The last of the snow is fading now. A rivulet runs from the eaves down the cobbled path, and you step over it carefully, like you've been here a lifetime. Maybe you have, or maybe it's just the rhythm, the wax, the warmth, the pinpricks of time that makes it feel so familiar. You glance once more at the sun climbing through the mist, and just like that you know, you'll never hear a modern alarm clock quite the same way again. Evening settles like breath on a window pane, quiet, invisible, inevitable. The last light of day has long since spilled its golden ink across the cloister garden, and now it's the turn of darkness to write its own chapter. The bells have rung once more, long and low. You don't count them. You feel them instead like heartbeats echoing in stone. Inside the dormitory, the air is cool again. The stone walls sigh gently with stored cold, and the wooden beams above seem to listen rather than speak. You sit on your pallet hands folded on your lap. You're not the only one who hesitates before sleep tonight. Across from you, Sister Beatrix fidgets with a loose stitch on her sleeve. Her eyes are distant. Next to her, young Clara smooths out her blanket 3 times before lying down. A quiet ritual, a silent reassurance. Your own bed, humble straw inside linen, ticking creaks as you ease back. It smells faintly of lavender, or maybe just your imagination holding on to last night's memory. Mainstream, historical fact, many medieval convents practiced the great silence from sunset to sunrise, during which no speech was allowed. Sleep was communal, often in shared halls, and any late-night movement or prayer happened in candlelight and hushed reverence. One candle remains. It stands at the center of the room, placed in a small iron sconce carved with a cross and the outline of a bird. The wax has dwindled to a shy stub and its flame dances like a secret, trying not to be overheard. The pin embedded in its side, small bent more bronze than gold, trembles with each shift in the wick. You lie back and wait. No one speaks. No one needs to. It's as if the whole room is holding its breath, waiting for the moment when time, at least in this cloister, lets go of its grip. Fringe tidbit. Some nunneries reportedly trained a designated sister, the candle watch, to sit up at night and mark divine hours, not just with pin drops, but with whispered prayers and soft bell chimes. If no candle pin fell, it was part devotion, part emergency plan, and part soothing insurance against time's forgetfulness. Your own breathing begins to match the rhythm of the candle. In, out, flicker, rest. The room darkens further. The scent of wax and wool mingles, comforting in its ordinariness. Historians still argue whether candle clocks like these were symbolic gestures or serious attempts at timekeeping. Did they mark holy hours with precision or simply provide a gentle nudge back to prayerful wakefulness? The answer perhaps doesn't matter. Not here, not now. Because the pin drops. Not loudly, not theatrically. It's a soft clink against the metal base, a sound so small it might have been a breath or a dream exhaling. But you hear it. Everyone hears it. And yet no one moves. Sleep hovers now, draping across shoulders and straw drifting through the air like incense at matins. You close your eyes, and in that twilight between wake and rest, you see it again, the flicker of candlelight against stone. The wax trails tracing the day's end, the hand of time not ticking, not shouting, but melting gently down into memory. You think of the sisters who came before, who lit these candles with calloused fingers and steady devotion, who whispered prayers into the dark, not knowing whether anyone would hear, who found comfort in the simple promise, when the pin drops, it is time. You think of Beatrix of Clara, of the cook, who always sings off key of the goose who bit your boot. You think of the rhythm of this place of sleep and wax and hours strung like beads across a rosary. And you let go. You drift not with urgency, not with effort, but with the trust of someone who knows the darkness is not empty. It is full of quiet, of time, of breath, of stories, and sleep. Now let everything soften. Let the breath in your chest slow, like the last drop of wax pooling gently on cool stone. The story is behind you now, not vanished, but woven into the hush that surrounds your room. You can still feel its threads of flickering light, ancient halls of hands, placing pins into candles, with a reverence only seen in places that truly understand stillness. Let your thoughts melt now like time once marked by flame. You don't need to remember how the nuns measured hours or what prayers they whispered. You don't even need to remember the names. All that matters is the feeling they left behind, this gentle rhythm, this quiet certainty that everything arrives in its moment. Let your limbs grow heavier, like velvet drapes, drawn across a window. Let your thoughts become fewer, then softer, then quiet. Like the reed mats of the ancients, like the straw beds in cloisters, like the hush that filled cathedrals before dawn. You're not alone in the silence. You are held here between story and sleep, between candlelight and dreams. Nothing is required of you now, not memory, not motion, not meaning. The last ember fades, the pin has fallen, and so too may you. Good night.